Pokémon Gold, Silver and Crystal made a big mistake. Halfway through the game, you're handed a guaranteed shiny Pokémon. You don't have to search for it, and you don't have to get lucky. It simply waits for you at the Lake of Rage.
What the developers didn't realize, however, is that this one Pokémon, the Red Gyarados, can give you access to a shiny version of almost every Pokémon in the game. But to understand how, you first need to know what makes shinies in Generation 2 different from every other Pokémon game that came after it.
The way it worked for the past 8 generations is simple enough. The game runs a hidden check behind the scenes, and if the numbers line up just right, a Pokémon becomes shiny. You've basically just won a hidden lottery. But Generation 2 did something completely different, and it created a side effect that most people have never even heard of. In Gen 2, it's mathematically impossible for certain Pokémon to be both shiny and female. Starters being the most famous example. And out of Unknown's 26 letter forms, only I and V have the possibility to be shiny. Why? Because in this generation, shininess isn't random. It's determined by a Pokémon's stats.
Every Pokémon in Gen 2 has 4 hidden values called DVs, or determinate values. Think of them like the ancestors to modern IVs. Attack, defense, speed and special. Each ranging from 0 to 15. And for a Pokémon to be shiny, those 4 numbers have to hit a very specific combination. The problem is that gender and Unknown's letter forms are also determined by these same DVs. So for certain species, the value that makes a Pokémon shiny and the values needed to be female can't both be true at the same time. The system won't allow it.
But here's where it gets interesting, because those DVs, the ones that control shininess, can be passed down through breeding. In Gen 2, when 2 Pokémon breed, some of the parents' DVs get passed down to the offspring. And they just happen to be the same DVs that determine shininess. So if one parent is shiny, the odds of hatching another shiny aren't 1 in 8,192 anymore. They can drop as low as 1 in 64. That's 128 times more likely. Which means a single shiny parent can produce shiny offspring at an extraordinary rate. And each of those offspring can do the same.
But this opens up a new question. Starting from a single shiny Pokémon, just how much of the Pokédex can you actually fill with shinies through breeding alone? The first hurdle is that most shiny Pokémon are absurdly rare, so you'd almost never have one to begin with. Unless the game gives you one for free. Now remember, the game already gave you a shiny Pokémon, the Red Gyarados. So the question isn't whether you can start this chain, it's just how far it can go. We know the Red Gyarados has the right DVs to be shiny, and we also know that those DVs can be inherited. But what makes Gyarados such a powerful starting point isn't just its shiny genes, it's where it sits in the breeding system. Gyarados belongs to 2 different egg groups, Water 2 and Dragon. Egg groups determine which Pokémon can breed with each other. So by sitting in 2 groups, Gyarados acts like a bridge between 2 completely separate breeding families. And that's what turns one shiny into many. Through Water 2, Gyarados can breed with the Pokémon you'd expect. Magikarp, Goldeen, Chinchou, Quillfish, and Remoraid. Aquatic species. No surprises there.
But the Dragon group is where things get interesting. Because Dragon doesn't just connect to one other egg group, it connects to 3. And each one opens up an entirely different corner of the Pokédex. The Charmander line is the first bridge. It sits in both Dragon and Monster. And Monster is massive. Pokémon like the Kanto starters, 2 of the Johto starters, Snorlax, Kangaskhan, the Nidoran family, and the Larvitar line. Pokémon that have nothing to do with water or dragons, but because of Charizard, the shiny gene can reach every single one of them.
There's a catch though. The offspring is always the mother species, and DVs are only passed down to the offspring of the opposite gender. So to move the gene into a new egg group, you need to breed a male that's inherited the right DVs from its mother. Once you have it, it becomes the bridge. And that's exactly how it works through Ekans. Dragon connects to Ekans, and Ekans connects to the field group. one of the largest in the game. Breed a male Ekans with the right DVs and suddenly the chain reaches Pokémon like Eevee and all of its evolutions. Growlithe, Vulpix, Mareep, and Houndour. Completely different types, completely different regions, all linked together through a single snake. And here's a detail that matters. The shiny odds aren't the same for every species. They depend on gender ratio. Because DVs are only passed to the opposite gender offspring, having a higher chance of being one gender also means a higher chance of getting a shiny. Species that skew heavily male like Eevee actually have the best odds, as high as 1 in 64. More balanced species sit closer to 1 in 128. It's never as bad as the base rate, but some species are easier than others.
And it doesn't stop there. The chain doesn't grow in a straight line. It fans outward in every direction. 10 egg groups, somewhere around 200 breedable Pokémon. All traceable back to a single encounter at the Lake of Rage. But that still isn't everything, because no matter how far the chain spreads, we eventually run into a wall. Entire egg groups that have no connection to Gyarados at all. Human-like, amorphous, mineral. The web hits a ceiling. And if you want to break through it, you need something completely different. You'd need a Pokémon that doesn't care about egg groups at all. One that can breed with almost anything, regardless of type, region, or family. And that Pokémon is Ditto. Ditto doesn't belong to any egg group. It exists outside of the system entirely. Water 1, field, human-like, amorphous, none of it matters. If a Pokémon can breed at all, Ditto can breed with it. A shiny Ditto wouldn't need a chain. It wouldn't need bridges. It would just need to exist.
There's only one problem. Getting a shiny Ditto isn't exactly easy. It appears on routes 34 and 35 at a 4 to 5% encounter rate. Combine that with base shiny odds of 1 in 8,192 and you're looking at roughly 1 in 164,000 encounters. So forget finding one naturally. We already have a Pokémon with the perfect shiny DVs. What we need is a way to get those values onto a Ditto. And to do that, we have to go back in time. Back to Generation 1. There are no shinies in Gen 1, no alternate colors, no sparkle animation. But the hidden stat values that produce a shiny in Gen 2, those still exist. The game just doesn't do anything with them yet. In Generation 1, when Ditto uses Transform, it copies everything about the target. Appearance, moves, and those hidden stat values. Normally that doesn't matter. The battle ends, Ditto resets, and the copied stats disappear.
But there's a trick. In Gen 1, Gyarados can learn Mimic, a move that lets it copy one of the opponent's moves mid-battle. If you use Mimic on a Ditto before it transforms, Gyarados copies Transform into its own moveset. Now, when Ditto transforms into the Red Gyarados, it becomes a Gyarados that still knows Transform, so it can transform again, a second time. And that second transformation does something the game was never designed to handle. The stat values Ditto picks up from this second copy, they stick. After the battle ends, they don't reset. Catch that Ditto, trade it forward into Gold, Silver or Crystal, and it arrives carrying the same shiny genes as your Red Gyarados. Perfectly set up to produce shiny offspring with almost anything in the game.
This isn't theoretical. It works on real hardware. It just takes patience and 2 generations of games. And if you have a copy of Pokémon Stadium 2, you can even check eggs for shiny Pokémon before they hatch. What could take hours of hatching suddenly takes minutes of scrolling. And if you're playing on the Virtual Console versions for 3DS, every shiny you breed this way can be transferred through Pokémon Home into the modern games. With a shiny Ditto, egg groups no longer matter. Human-like, amorphous, mineral. Every group that was walled off before is now open. But the most important group we've unlocked is one that was never going to happen any other way. Genderless Pokémon and male-only species. Pokémon like Magnemite, Voltorb, Hitmonchan and Tauros can only breed with Ditto. either because they have no female counterpart to breed with or lack a gender entirely. No chain of egg groups, no matter how long, would ever have reached them.
The only Pokémon you genuinely can't reach are the ones outside of the breeding system entirely. The legendaries, the mythicals, and a handful of edge cases with no egg group at all. Everything else is fair game. One Gyarados, one exploit, and nearly every shiny in the game is within reach. When Game Freak tied shininess to a Pokémon's stats, they created a system with real, inherited consequences. Whether they knew what that would lead to, whether any of this was intentional, that's the part we're honestly not sure about.
Game Freak tied shininess to a Pokémon's stats, and that single decision created a chain reaction that reached nearly every species in the game. But Gen 2 wasn't the only time a Pokémon game's shiny system completely fell apart. Pokémon Colosseum broke shinies in an entirely different way, and if you want to hear that story, check out this video. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. And as always, a big thank you to our Patreon and YouTube members.